Thanks a lot for having me here. Just moving it out of the way. So there's amazing excitement in the room. Obviously, everybody is eager to learn on what new things are there in the market, in the house for supply chain domain. So let's start with a little bit of a history. So we are at the fourth phase of industrial revolution. So first, as we know, the very first one was like an invention of steam engine and steam-powered machines, turbines, everything. The second one was obviously the mass production, how the supply lines actually came about, and the whole packaging industry, the manufacturing goods, the mass production of any kind you can think of. The third one in the 70s was around robotics. How can you have like less error-prone behaviors in the factories and the entire supply chain by introducing machines of various kinds? Some were not even called robots at that point in time. They were just machines. But now we know and we realize like robots do not have to look like a robot or a physical human being. It could be any machine which does its job. But interestingly, the current age where we are sitting, we are at the cusp of this digitization age. And if you see closer, it's a combination of two different things. One is all kind of technology progress that we have made in past couple of decades. And the other part is all the smart devices which are connecting almost everything. And as people familiar with the Internet of Things, almost like 50 billion, and some estimates even go beyond that, like 50 billion plus things are going to be connected in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is really the hyper connectivity of digitization is really the edge. And why do we care about that? So let's take a quick pop quiz. So how many of these Fortune 500 companies were there in this like 20-year time frame, 1995 and 2014? What are the guesses like in both? Something which is, and here we are talking about like multi-billion-dollar companies, not like fly-by-night startups. So what do we think? What's the number here? These Fortune 500 companies, they were on the list in both 1995 and 2014. How many of these 500, they were supposed to be 500, how many of these 500 were there on the list? Any guesses? 30. That's too low. 100, 150. It's only 12%. 61 out of 500 actually were able to survive over less than 20-year period. And once again, at the risk of repetition, these are not startups we are talking about. These are multi-billion-dollar big industries we are talking about. And they should not be vanishing overnight from the face of the earth, but they did. Another pop quiz. What is the average lifespan of a company once it gets listed on S&P 500? Again, S&P 500 being, we are talking about the big companies here. What is the average lifespan? Let me give a hint. In 1920, the average lifespan, once a company got listed on that list, S&P 500, average lifespan was 67 years. So they were around for 67 years. What is it today? Guesses, 20? 25, 43. The average lifespan is just 15 years today. So we should not be delusional in thinking that if we don't innovate, if we don't use technology for the advancement of our respective domains, we are going to be in a good shape, in a good position. We are going to be surviving this next downturn. It's not. The future is actually much more scarier than it looks like. So change is the new status quo. So we are at the cusp of growth and innovation. It's a corner of both of those things. In order to achieve growth, we need to invest, and not just invest heavily into innovation of every kind, and it can come in many flavors, many shapes and sizes. If we talk about innovation in a generic way, digitization, which is the buzzword of today, if we go deeper, zoom into that, it basically touches two different worlds, the IT-centric world and the OT, or the operational technology-centric world. So operational technology, what we mean by, especially in the supply chain, logistics, physical handling, the manpower, the huge cranes, moving packages here and there, the big machines which are manufacturing things, all the action-oriented things. And the IT side of it is the subtle back end, the computer systems, the business systems that talk to each other, figure out the invoices, way bills, the contract negotiations, all those systems. That you have in the data center, where many times access is restricted by fingerprinting and iris scan and a lot of other things, so that only authorized people can get into a protected area. When things are connected, which are outside, out there in the open premises and open campuses, open fields, warehouses, everywhere and anywhere, and sometimes the devices are so tiny, they do not have even enough processing power to take care of the complex security transactions which are expected of them. So how do you deal with these kind of situations? How do you tackle these scenarios? And that's where the prioritization comes into picture. Things are not free. Expectations are also not free. They are expected. But when I was looking around, this is a very interesting supply chain 2.0 source from Accenture. And I tried to map. It has all the 4 elements, the rapid, scalable, intelligent, and connected. All the 4 elements of the future of supply chain, and if you map various technology elements on top of that. So how can you have rapid developments or prototyping, or you can interpret, you're free to interpret rapid in whichever way it makes sense, but in order to leverage the rapid part of it, really, we need to leverage some elements of technology, maybe it be 3D printing or drones of some kind for delivering rapidly things in a more cost-effective manner, or fog computing or deep learning, predicting the demand, predicting the outcomes, predicting the consumer behavior, predicting the supplier behavior, a lot of things fall into place. So you can leverage many pieces of technology. Same thing goes for scalable. Many times when we believe like scalable means what? It's okay, connecting your data to the cloud, it means you're done. You're cloud connected, everything is nice and cool. No, it's not. Many times all the natural disasters, disruptions in the connectivity in the world, they basically disconnect you from the cloud-based services. So how do you leverage alternative mechanisms, more resilient, more robust connectivity mechanisms, not only between the networks, but between your business applications as well? How can you ensure that? So there are alternative computing paradigms. Fog computing, for example, it's coming up. And there is a consortium around that as well, Open Fog Consortium, which obviously Cisco is a pioneering member, and 40+ entities, including USC, they are member of that. So it's an alternative computing paradigm so that you don't have to push everything to the cloud. You can leverage the compute, storage, and network throughout in your entire end-to-end ecosystem. So certain things can be done in the cloud, certain things can be done on your smartphones, on your edge devices, and certain things can be done in between, so that overall it provides much more security, much more resiliency that you require for supply chain 2.0 operations. Intelligent is another dimension where, again, you have to predict the future. Nobody can accurately predict the future, but the machine learning, deep learning advances are such a stage that you can correlate various things. You can have enough processing power to predict the future demands, future supply sources, or even sometimes with, like, for example, weather patterns, right? So there are not enough weather models for low altitude weather. So there are a bunch of companies which are coming up. They are trying to leverage drones which are flying around 100 feet to 400 feet and get the weather data as input, and they can predict the weather in a much more accurate fashion, which is otherwise not possible today. So how do you predict the weather more accurately? How do you factor in all these weather patterns in your supply chain organization? So you might need to use different set of technologies which we are not even thinking about in the future. Like, how would we think drones and supply chain from a weather perspective? But yes, there is a correlation. And fourth part is connectivity. So secure connectivity, as I was saying earlier, the cyber physical aspects of it, physical more importantly. Cyber connectivity, yes, we have pretty much kind of solved that problem, despite there are so many hacks around, but still there are so many advances in that particular domain. But the physical part of the security, the connected, the whole connectivity between these 50+ billion devices, that's an interesting aspect. Blockchain, for example, in a connected and scalable manner. So many of you might have heard about the Bitcoin per se, but the Bitcoin not as a cryptocurrency, but the algorithm behind Bitcoin, blockchain, which is like highly scalable, highly distributed, not a single point of control. It provides much needed connectivity, resiliency, and security as well, so that it's like all immutable transactions. So once something is done, it's done. You cannot go back and change it. So when goods are moved from one place to another in supply chain pipeline, you need some sort of an assurance that things are not getting modified. They are not being tampered with in between. So what you expect to produce, what you expect to get, what your contractual obligations say, everything is in sync. And that is enforced by machine intelligence, not human intelligence. Typically, that's the source of errors, knowingly or unknowingly. So from a 2.0 perspective, you can easily map out various elements of technology. But if you look more traditional parts of supply chain, all the sourcing, planning, making, fulfilling, selling, and support, from that angle also, various phases of supply chain, you can map these various technology elements. I don't know if it's easy to see there, but IoT or drones or augmented reality, virtual reality, fog computing, or machine learning, they can be mapped to various phases of supply chain elements. So if you just look a couple of examples, like sourcing, right, for example. So you can have machine learning and predictive algorithms, but blockchain is being considered increasingly as a use for smart contracts for sourcing. So for example, if an automobile manufacturer, they are sourcing thousands of parts from many hundreds of suppliers, how can they ensure the pricing, the contract, the quality, and the quantity, everything being enforced in a mutual trust manner? How can they avoid the human communications and leverage technology to make these transactions much more smoother? So blockchain has very high potential on the sourcing side. Same thing on the fulfillment side, right? If you look at it, or even on the making side, drones are being used for like warehouse surveillance, security, inspections, indoors as well as outdoors. So you can just fly around and you can capture the entire stock, like, okay, exactly what kind of things you have. And if it's equipped with RFID or any other kind of smart tags, you can get the readings instantaneously. I mean, warehouse robots are no longer they're a surprise. They're pretty common these days. But going beyond, taking one step further, utilizing these different technologies is obviously the next step. In selling and support part also, you can utilize augmented reality, for example, or virtual reality. So Cisco had demonstrated at last couple of Cisco Live conferences, which happens typically major ones twice a year. So an augmented reality and support person. So customer calls in, say, I have this problem. So how do you solve customer problem? So you present a virtual view, and at the same time, some technician far off, maybe in a different part of the world, They are having a combined augmented view also with the same parts or same problem specimen, and they are fixing, and as the customer is trying to see, oh, this is how you fix, this is how you replace, take out a faulty part and insert a new part in its place, and this is exactly how you're done. These are the steps. Switch off the power supply, take these precautions and do it. So you can enable a lot of self-service mechanisms and achieve higher degrees of customer satisfaction by leveraging these various pieces of technologies in that manner. But ultimately, it has to drive this information value loop, right? So this is another by Deloitte. It's a very interesting slide. It's targeted for IoT, but it's applicable in every single aspect of supply chain. So if you look in the center, there has to be the value driver. Why use all these technologies, right? I mean, if it's working fine, why bother with it, right? That's a general thought process, like why should I even care? But these three elements in between, the magnitude, the risk, and time, they are very critical for supply chain industry in general. The magnitude is more of at the scale. It has to be more. You always try to achieve higher magnitude of profits, higher magnitude, higher scope, and higher scale, higher frequency to maximize your profits, I mean, as any business driver would do. And risk and time, you try to reduce or shorten as much as possible. So you try to mitigate risks by various means. Weather was just one of the factors, geopolitical events, or even exchange rates in different currencies. Like, how do you mitigate those kind of risks? By using technology, by using predictive tools, by having distributed intelligence in various parts of the world, so you are always kept up to speed on what's happening. And these drivers are kind of giving birth to various sensors, various connectivity, various aspects of technology where you can utilize, how you can leverage, and what are the costs. As I was saying earlier, there is nothing free. There is always cost associated, but how much value you are gaining for that cost, that matters. And this is a classic trap. I like this slide a lot. It shows the thought process, which usually goes in business decision makers' mindset. It's a linear versus exponential. So when you do linear thinking, this is the line you proceed. So you invest something, it gives you result. You invest something more, it gives you results. And yes, you keep on doing that because it produces results and it produces outcomes that you desire for improvement. And that's the real trap, because it's a quick win, it's in your comfort zone, and you are able to correlate that this is what I did and this is the result I got. But in order to truly leverage technology in a disruptive manner, this is the part. So if you can survive in this area of disappointment, keep on investing, have some patience, have a strategic, a focused effort and approach, eventually the gains you realize, the disruption advantage, is much more than you would have otherwise. But this is it's a classic trap for any big company, and I'm not immune to that either, because it's a human tendency. But sometimes you have to have little more little more structured approach, much more disciplined approach for innovation on how to capture the disruptive aspects of it. Because many of you might have seen this concentric circles, the three-way part. You usually, what do you do is the proof point, what all you can achieve, what all you can show, how do you achieve in terms of processes and workflows and all that, and what do you want to achieve, the goals and the dreams and all. And I admire this guy. I'm not an advocate for his book, Simon Sinek. He has done like amazing presentations on this topic, like start with why do something. What and how parts will follow naturally. What is the purpose? What are we trying to optimize for? There may be so many attributes, so many equations we can manipulate, so many things we can achieve using technology, so many domains we can affect. But what exactly? Discover what is the why. So some of the areas like reduction of risk, for example, in supply chain domain, or driving efficiency in terms of work processes or profit margins, I mean, those could be some of the attributes. Or capital access, like how do you increase the churn? How do you gain more access to capital on a day-to-day basis? How can you discover alternative sources of funding or new business models on a day-to-day basis? Or how you discover new markets, for that matter? Like how can you apply the same principles into slightly adjacent or something disruptive? in a way. How can you protect your brand and reputation, basically? So the customer service example, how can you keep your customers very happy so that there is no return? The feedback loop in the supply chain, it should not hurt you. How can you achieve those things? And there are various technological elements, IoT and fog computing and drones and blockchain and AR, VR, and there is this hyper-connectivity. You will be able to achieve all that. I mean, it's like a simple cost and value equation. Everybody, whoever is smart enough and everybody smart, will be able to achieve, leverage whatever appropriate technology tools to achieve whatever the growth or business drivers we are trying to optimize on the top. But still, that one question, the dreaded question, remains. What's our why? Why we are doing certain things? What do we have to gain? What do we have to offer? Why do we need to optimize? Why do we need to leverage all these technology tools? So let's ask ourselves this very important question. Why we are doing something? How are we helping humanity at large? How are we making a difference in the world? How are we optimizing the resources and supplies and the consumption models in the world? How can we benefit the maximum number of human beings in the world by whatever our actions are? Because that's what matters in the end. Nothing else matters. And that's where we need to have our thinking hats on. We need to focus on that, like why or what we are offering to the rest of the world. And with that, I'll rest. Thank you.